Hi, I'm Heather Staines, a senior consultant at Delta Think and one of the Charleston conference directors. I'm very excited to be here today to speak with Paul Rosenzweig. Paul is principal at Red Branch Consulting and a lecturer at George Washington University. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to join you again.
Great. Well, let's kick off. Maybe you can tell us just a little bit about yourself. I know from our planning call that you've had a little bit of a varied career that spans from academic research to law to government service. When I look back at I always call it zigzaggy career, I always like to point out that it's kind of important to learn what I did not want to do as well as I would like to do. So maybe tell us a little bit about your pathway and some of the through lines that you see.
Well, I think like you, I probably had what I like the word zigzaggy. That's pretty good. I mean, I started my life as a chemist, a chemistry major in undergraduate, and I have a graduate degree in chemical oceanography. When I was in college and started at grad school, I thought for sure that at this point in my life, I'd be a senior oceanographer examining the world, and instead I'm a lawyer. so so that's a pretty big zigzag. Um, I think each step actually made some sense. I realized very much quickly that I didn't actually want to be a practicing oceanographer. It seemed a lot more interesting in theory than it did in practice. In particular, I didn't like begging the government for money. Uh, so uh, so I quit the graduate program and I wound up working for a couple years there, and then I took the LSATs and decided to go to law school. On a whim is too strong because my father is a lawyer, was a lawyer, and so I probably had him in mind a bit and went off to law school. I thought I was going to do environmental law because oceanography, environmental law. No, but I wound up in a place called the Environmental Crime Section at the Department of Justice, and I found that I liked the criminal law side of that a lot more than the environmental side. So I kept going in that direction, and as more relevant to what we've been talking about at the Charleston conference and my more recent thing, my more recent activities after my the big change, which was really uh, disruptive to my professional career, was 9/11. I lost three friends that day, and uh, soon thereafter transitioned from uh, criminal law to national security, homeland security, criminal law, and wound up being one of the earliest, not right at the very start, but very early entrant into the brand new Department of Homeland Security, from which I wound up doing a lot of Homeland Security stuff and especially a lot of cybersecurity stuff. Because one of the things I had done back as an oceanographer, all things come back around, was some very early computer programming, large scale databasing. And so when the cybersecurity crisis hit the government in the 2005, 2006, 2007 timeframe, that was part of me. And now I left government in '09. I was a political appointee for President Bush. Um, so I left on January 20th, 2009, gave my office to some Obama appointee, and started a little consulting company, wound up teaching at George Washington University part time as an adjunct, and amongst my many clients is the American Library Association, which is how I wind up with you.
There may be folks who are joining us today who either were not attending the Charleston conference or have not had a chance to go back yet and look through some of the recordings. I was there in Charleston, where you joined us virtually from where you're joining us today in Costa Rica. If there are folks who have not had a chance to be part of that session, which was about executive orders, are there a couple of takeaways that you could kind of give them today, and maybe a commercial for why they should go back and actually watch that session? I know it's always a very, very popular session at the end of a long week in Charleston, and we were very excited to have you join us.
Well, the best reason to go back and watch it is that I gave it, and I'm a brilliant lecturer. So, of course, you want to see that. But that having been said, here's the TLDR of the session that perhaps will entice you. Every president since George Washington has used executive orders to organize the government. He did so to organize the government's then new U.S. government's response to the ongoing war between Britain and France, for example, and to also set up his cabinet and assign responsibility between all of the cabinet officers. Um, and executive orders of that form have gone through to every president, including Trump one and Biden. I think I had the exact number in the lecture, but I think when Biden left office, he was on executive order number 14,000, 100 and something. So they're not rare things. What is rare and different today is the way that President Trump uses them, that he purports to control not just the executive branch, but people outside the executive branch. He purports to order courts to do things. He purports to order other states to do things in an order about the elections and how elections should be conducted. So he has an extremely unusual and expansive view of executive authority. And to a large degree, and this is the end of my little summary, to a large degree, what we've seen is that insofar as he's using it in extreme ways inside the government, like reorganizing institutions or eliminating uh, complete departments and agencies like the U.S. Institute for Peace, the Supreme Court has tended to let him. But to the extent that he is giving that authority and asserting it for control of people outside the executive branch, um, like his tariff case, for example, it seems as though the Supreme Court has been more skeptical of that assertion of authority. So that's the lecture in a nutshell. A lot more history, a lot more examples, a lot more legal argument. So maybe you don't need that, but still, I'm a brilliant lecturer, so you should go back and listen anyway.
Well, I would certainly welcome people to go back and take a look at that. Um, on these executive orders, so that was the beginning of November, which seems like a million years ago. Um, are there any executive orders since the Charleston get together that have particularly kind of drawn your attention?
Well, they're every day. It's almost like which day has happened um, that has not done. I mean, recently, for example, he purported to order the courts not to use any of the profits that the oil companies will be making from their exploitation of Venezuelan oil to not to use those profits to satisfy legal judgments against those oil companies. So what he was trying to do was offer the oil companies a legal protection against them having to actually pay their regular judgments that they might owe for a tort or for an environmental damage to Louisiana. He wanted to say no. If you go to Venezuela, that money is going to be carved off and made safe. Nobody's tested that yet. I suspect really strongly that it won't work. Uh, you know, and that the courts will say no. He has purported to stop all child care funding to the state of Minnesota on the grounds that there's fraud there. That probably won't work. He tried to cut $10 billion in healthcare funding, only, of course, from blue Democratic states. And just yesterday, a federal district court judge in Rhode Island issued a restraining order that said he couldn't do that. He purported on national security grounds to try and stop the completion of a wind farm off of Rhode Island because, of course, wind farms cause cancer, as everybody who's listened to the president knows. And just 2 days ago, well, no, I guess it was last Friday because today's Tuesday. Last Friday, a federal district judge also said, no, you can't stop a project that is 98% complete just because you think it's uh, uh, an alleged national security problem. So that's just four in the last month, top of mind.
One of the other things that you mentioned, in your intro is your early involvement in cyber security, around, data sets and the like after 9/11. I know that you taught a class in AI law and privacy before the pandemic. And I'll say before something that also seems like yesterday, but yet 10 years ago, is the introduction of Chat GPT, and how, things are accelerating, on the AI front. You taught that class, well before any of us had heard of ChatGPT, and governmental attempts to connect, giant, data sets and the like, and, how those things are intersecting. Can you just tell us about how, some of your early touch points in cybersecurity and privacy and artificial intelligence have impacted, your thinking today?
Well, um, as I said, I first started doing computers back in the 70s and then in the 80s, and then I stopped and I came back to it when the government realized that all of our national cybersecurity systems were very, very insecure in the early 2000s, and that was a genuine crisis because we had rushed towards the internet and towards the network and towards the exchange of data without giving much thought to the downsides of it. And my perspective on that narrow piece was a security piece, but you see kind of the same instinct with respect to social media, which has run forward very quickly without any thought to its downsides. And now we seem to be recapturing the exact same dynamic of rushing ahead with technology without much thought to law, policy, ethics, morality in the artificial intelligence world. Um, you can readily see that the growth of artificial intelligence has created a step function uptick in the ability of data collectors to process data, analyze it, consume it, and draw from it inferences about people. We call it, there's a lawyer's phrase for it, we call it the mosaic theory, which is to say that one spot of paint is just one spot of paint. But if you step back from a Seurat painting or from a Roman mosaic, one tile is just a blue tile. You step back and it's a beautiful picture of Athena or something like that. You step back from a Seurat painting and it's a boat on the River Seine. Um, and knowledge of human nature is the same way. You know that I live in Costa Rica, that you know just one thing about me. You know 10 things about me, and all of a sudden, you know everything about me. Um, there was a study done recently about geolocation, where you go, and the basic answer is if I can track your phone and know everywhere you've gone in the last 6 months, I know 80% of where you're going to go in the next 6 months. Because people are creatures of habit. You go to your office, you go to the gym, you go to your church, you go to your doctor. There's not a lot of one offs. And artificial intelligence fueled with huge, large scale collections of data is just stripping away anonymity and privacy. I mean, to to be current and political, the single most um, challenging thing that's happening right now, I think, is not so much um, the violence of ICE officers as the fact that they're collecting on their cell phones and through other cameras um, facial recognition takes of every person who's out there protesting, thus beginning the creation of a database of what they will call domestic terrorists and what you and I might call um, righteous protesters. And that's fueled by artificial intelligence's ability to take the picture that you're seeing right now of me and match it to me in a crowd tomorrow, outside of ICE headquarters, or you know anywhere else you might capture my face in public.
Yeah, when you're working with students, I've heard students have maybe different expectations around privacy, around their data, who they might share their data with. What kinds of conversations, do you have, with your students? And I'd also like to ask, if your students are using AI, or you have a policy on AI disclosure. So just some thoughts on that intersection.
Well, two questions. I'll answer them differently. With respect to students and their concern of privacy, it's actually bimodal. There's a small group who are totally freaked out about the privacy thing and don't go on social media, don't put their pictures out, don't let their friends tag them, all that jazz. But that's really the minority. I would estimate over the years no more than 15%, probably closer to 10. Um, then the rest of them are, I've lost it anyway. I've been on social media all my life. Why should I bother changing my behavior now? They don't care. Um, and we have a discussion about that. And I try to explain to them that, at their age, say 25, there's already on the order of 15,000 data points in the databases about them. And for people of a larger age, such as, well, I'll say me. I'm going to assume that you're much younger than me, Heather. But for people of my age, that 15,000 is closer to 150,000. And if you have a public profile, as I do a little, uh, it's even larger than that. And, so even if I fight it at this point, my nature my is an open book, and it would be um, hard to prevent that from happening. And frankly, to some degree, I think the students are right, which is that even if you fight it, even if you stay off of social media, um, you can't not use a credit card. You can't not travel. You can't. Um, uh, I mean, all the other sources of data other than social media are ripe and available and can't really be um, uh, the government, or frankly commercial vendors can't, their access can't be restricted. Commercial vendors scare me less because they can't put me in jail, but just the other day I made the mistake of clicking on a an advertisement for a wallet because I need a new wallet, and now my feed is stuffed with wallet ads from I now know more about the names of men's wallet manufacturers than I ever thought I would know. And but I have a lot more choices now, so I'm going to go buy myself a wallet. But there you go.
Yeah, I usually don't mind that if it's actually something that I am looking for, but I wish there was a way to tell it, okay, I already bought the thing and I'm not looking anymore, and switch it off. I think they need
It
to
would be nice, wouldn't it?
up their game if artificial intelligence could do that. Do you allow the students to use artificial intelligence in their homework assignments? And
Um, During class, yes. For exams, no. I mean, they can use it for preparing, for finding things, but the law school has a very strong policy against using it for. I mean, we use it in class because I'm trying to teach them what it can do and what it does do. So I can't not use it. In fact, that's the whole point of the class. But I don't let them. It's one of the reasons that I've trended now more lately back to in um, in class exams,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
that's the only real way I can get a handle on it.
Yeah, we're taking a look at it in the context of some of our consulting projects. It seems like a very eager assistant that doesn't know what it's doing, but wants to contend that it does because it just wants to please you.
It
Um,
does and it doesn't. I mean, I think that a large part of that is that we haven't figured out how to use it very well yet. I mean, it's just a predictive model. I mean, ChatGPT. I mean, it has much better uses, much more less eager, much more effective um, at things like medical diagnosis, things of sophistication. I read a study pretty recently, maybe a couple years ago, about how um, one sophisticated AI program is better at diagnosing schizophrenia than human doctors, and and demonstrably so. They go forward and then they go back and then they feed it old cases and they feed it, and it's quite good. And so, um, what I think we're seeing now is that narrow taskings work very well, um, but it's not anywhere near general intelligence, the artificial general intelligence that people think about in the science fiction realm. And most of the errors kind of come in that realm where you just ask it a generic question, you know, who do you think is going to win the Super Bowl? And then it doesn't really even know who's in the Super Bowl this year.
Doesn't even know what the Super Bowl is. Um, so I know you do a lot of writing, and you write, for the Atlantic. How did that get started for you?
Well, I was fortunate enough back in, I don't know, 2016 or 2017. I can't remember exactly when my first one was, to be asked to write a short piece about something I'd said on some TV show or some podcast. I mean, very much like derived from something like this. And one of the editors saw that and said, "We'd really like you to write that." And so I said okay, and I wrote it, and I guess they thought it was good enough to publish because they published it. Um, and then a few months later, I had an idea, and I sent it in, and they gave me they referred me to one of their senior editors, a lovely woman named Rebecca Rosen, who uh, who worked with me on developing that, and then they published a second, and now it's become a thing. I can send her 5 ideas, and she'll say I want 1, 3, and 4. 2 and 5 I don't like, and so now I with some regularity I get to send them ideas about things I want to write about, and with less regularity they come to me. I mean, in the immediate aftermath of the assault on Venezuela, I wrote a piece about the Department of Justice's prosecution of Maduro for them, that they had asked me to write. I might have thought of it myself, but I didn't. They did, and so over the last last year I probably published 15 or 16 pieces with them, and the year before that, I mean, to be honest with you, a lot of it has to do with the fact that um, Donald Trump gives me so much good material, you know, to write about, or bad material, depending upon your perspective. But he gives me the material. So Donald Trump is. I sometimes think that uh, when he leaves office, I'll probably have to stop writing for the Atlantic because there won't be that much to write about.
You're like a cast member on Saturday Night Live, and the most frequent character they play, moves out of or into the news cycle. But that's exciting. Um, I usually like to, maybe as we get towards the end of this, find out if you have a story about a librarian or a library, and an impact that may have had, on you. And I know from our planning call that you do have a story. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yes, indeed. Libraries have been a part of my life since I was a kid. I mean, to start with, I was always a reader. One of the happiest days was when I got my first library card, probably aged 9 or 10. But the story that I want to tell, which is truly transformative, is that was my first job. I worked at the Great Neck Public Library in Great Neck, New York, where I grew up, from age 14 until age 18 when I went off to college, 17 and a half, whatever that was. I started off um, with grunt work, reshelving books. So putting checked out books back on the shelves in the right place, you know, alphabetical by author and then by number. Yeah, it was all, it was, I would say boring work, but I got to do it, and I got to be in the library, and I love that because I love being with books. Um, and by the end of the time there, I was an assistant to the research librarian. We had a research librarian. We had two actually. Their job was to help um, patrons find information, books that they might want to read, or access to magazines and articles that were difficult to find or had to be taken back on interlibrary loan, which was a thing back then because you actually had to go and get the book from someone else. You couldn't just find it on the internet. And at the end, I got to be their assistant, which meant helping them with the research they were doing, and sometimes even being alone at the desk while late in the day, from 6 to 8, they'd go home and I'd be there, and if I could help the patron, I would, and if I couldn't, I'd say, yeah. I'm going to put that question in front of the research librarian tomorrow, and we'll get you an answer the next day. And so so it was really it's really been a delightful full circle when I guess it's probably now about 6 years ago. I The American Library Association became a client of mine, and I got to start giving them advice, mostly about cybersecurity and privacy and government interactions with libraries. So I don't do anything with copyright law or funding for libraries or anything like that. But it's really just a lot of fun to have my first job now be basically one of my last jobs of my life.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's been a pleasure talking to you today, Paul. Thank you for participating in the long arm session from everyone there, and please go watch it if you haven't had a chance yet. And thank you for being part of this interview series.
It's my pleasure to join you, and my fond hope is that maybe in one of the upcoming years I'll actually get to Charleston instead of having to zoom in from here.
Oh, be careful. You'll love it so much. You'll make a habit of it. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
take care.